All right, happy Tuesday. Here we go. We're continuing with Praisworthy and Jack. They are on their way to the gold fields, and they have just come introduce themselves to the captain. Said that they were the stowaways. So he refused to give in to a lurking homesickness. He refused to give in to a lurking homesickness, but he found himself thinking of his two younger sisters, Constance and Sarah, left behind in Boston with Aunt Arabella. They had surely burst into tears to find him gone, run away, and perhaps they had not dried their eyes yet. But there was no help for it, he told himself. Neither Jack nor his sisters remembered their own parents, who had been taken away by cholera. The children had gone to live with their Aunt Arabella in the big house on the bay, with almost more rooms than they could count. There was a young and she was as young and beautiful as the house was old and grand. It had been in the Flagg family for more than a century. In times past, the house had been filled with servants and guests and laughter, but the family had fallen upon hard times. Aunt Arabella had closed off half the rooms and no longer entertained. Of her staff she kept only an upstairs maid, a downstairs maid, and Praisworthy. And then Jack had overheard Banker Stites tell Aunt Arabella that her inheritance was almost gone. In another year, he warned, she would be virtually penniless. Even the house, with all its family memories, would have to be sold. I advise you to fire your remaining servants at once, Banker Stites had said. You can't afford them any more. But I couldn't do that, Aunt Arabella smiled. Why, they are like members of the family. Oh, no, I couldn't let them go. It was then that Jack knew he must help Aunt Arabella. But how? At the same time, stories drifting back from California excited everyone's imagination. He had heard of men picking up nuggets the size of goose eggs and stubbing their toes on lumps the size of pumpkins. A boy could do that, even a boy not yet 13. Without a second thought, Jack made plans to run away to the gold fields. But nothing escaped Praisworthy, and he found Jack out. Instead of informing Aunt Arabella, for she would never consent to such a venture, Praisworthy kept Jack's secret and more. An excellent plan, he said. A worthy plan indeed, for he was as devoted to Aunt Arabella as Jack himself. I'll go with you, Master Jack. There will be ship's passage to pay. I've a few banknotes put aside. And together, pooling savings, the boy and the butler set out for the world at large. But thanks to the light-fingered thief, the world had proved to be no larger than the inside of a potato barrel. Blast! Said the captain, standing at a porthole. There's the sea reef and a beam of us now, standing there as if to thumb her nose at us. Jack got a glimpse of the other ship on a rising swell, a two-masted side-wheeler, exactly like the Lady Wilma. If I may observe, Praisworthy remarked with his perfect calm, it is a 15,000-mile voyage around Cape Horn to San Francisco. I believe it is not the beginning of a race that counts, sir, but the end. If I win the race, I'll get command of a new clipper shipbuilding. If I win the race, I'll get command of a new clipper shipbuilding in the yards. She'll be the pride of the seas, and I want her, sir. Captain Swain unhooked the brass voice tube and bellowed to the engine room below. More steam, sir! It's all we can do to keep up. More steam! And then he turned to the stowaways. You'll work off your passage on this ship by grabs. You there, boy! Jack, who was already standing straight, stood even straighter. Yes, sir? You'll work as ship's boy. I'll run your legs off, and that's letting you off easy. And you, sir? Praisworthy at your service. What in tarnation are you in that get-up? I'm a butler, sir. A butler? The captain roared. A butler? What in the name of Old Scratch can a butler do? It's the other way around, sir, said Praisworthy, who took pride in his calling. There's nothing a butler cannot do. I open doors, I close doors, I announce that dinner is served, I supervise the staff and captain the household, much as you do the ship, sir. A most exacting job, if I may say so. Bah! And Jack ventured, Aunt Arabella says he's the best there is. She says there's no problem too big for Praisworthy. Silence, boy! A butler you are. By grabs, I know where there's a door you can open. The furnace door. And you can shovel in fuel. To the coal bunkers with you, butler. Now out of my sight before I change my mind and put you both in chains. Sir, said Jack, trembling inwardly, I don't care to be ship's boy. What? If Praisworthy is going to the coal bunkers, I'll shovel coal too. Jack met Praisworthy's glance, but only for a moment. We're partners, sir. Either send me to the coal bunkers or, he gulped, or put me in chains. The wild bull of the seas was struck absolutely speechless. Don't pay any attention to Master Jack, said Praisworthy quickly. The boy is light-headed from sheer hunger. He hasn't eaten since yesterday, and he doesn't know what he's saying. Yes, I do, said Jack. You told me yourself we'd stick together through thick and thin. By this time the captain had recovered his voice, and a smile lurked in his eye. By grabs, he said, by grabs. Here's a lad with stuffings. He doesn't want an easy berth, wants a man's job. All right, to the coal bunkers, both of you. Thank you, sir, said Jack, picking up his carpet-bag. The captain cocked a shaggy eyebrow. It wouldn't hurt none if you stopped off first at the galley and told the cook I said to give you something to eat. A man can't shovel coal on an empty stomach, or a lad either. Now be out of my sight. The door flew open and the stowaways withdrew. They descended one ladder and then the other, got their breakfast and reported to the engineer. He pointed out the boiler furnace, the coal bins, and the shovels. Praisworthy removed his bowler hat, his white gloves, and the umbrella from the crook of his arm. They made a neat pile of their coats and rolled up their sleeves. Unless I miss my guess, said Praisworthy, the wild bull of the seas is a gentleman at heart. I hope he wins the race, said Jack. The stowaways set to work shoveling coal into the yellow flames of the furnace, flames that made the steam that turned the great side wheels. Jack was eager to work beside Praisworthy, as if it brought them even closer together. Sometimes he wished Praisworthy were anything but a butler. It imposed a slight distance between them that Praisworthy was careful to maintain. Jack would be happy to be called Jack, just Jack, and not Master Jack, but Praisworthy wouldn't hear of it, even though they were now partners. Praisworthy, said Jack, wiping back the hair from his forehead. He had to raise his voice above the howl of the fire and the clank of the machinery. Praisworthy, do you really believe that cut-purse is aboard the Lady Wilma? I do indeed, said the butler, digging into the bunker of coal, and we shall unmask the scoundrel. But how? How? Why, I haven't the faintest idea, Master Jack, but between us we'll think of something by grabs. While the captain went back on deck and froze his whiskers again, while the passengers huddled around the two pot-bellied stoves, Praisworthy whistled and Jack hummed. They alone, of the gold-seekers aboard the Lady Wilma, had a roaring fire to warm them as the side-wheeler went splashing through the sleet and the wind and the sea. Chapter 2. How to Catch a Thief. After many days, like a dog after a rain, the Lady Wilma shook winter from her masts and riggings. She entered the southern latitudes. The sun came out bright and fresh as if newly forged, and the nights were speckled over with stars. The fires went out in the pot-bellied stoves, and the passengers began to shed their greatcoats and heavy woolens. In another week they were down to their shirt-sleeves. In the lower regions of the ship, Praisworthy and Jack were still at their shovels. They were powdered over with coal dust, but Jack did not mind the work. It would toughen him for digging in the gold fields, he thought. Still, the roaring flames had lost their friendliness. The boiler room was becoming distinctly overheated. Master Jack, said Praisworthy, thinking of the tropic zones that lay ahead, another week at our post and we shall be roasted alive. But the heat did not bother Jack, for every turn of the paddle wheels brought the far country a bit closer. Even though the sea route was the long way around, it was faster than the overland trail across the plains. The ox-drawn wagons trains were sometimes a year in reaching California, and Jack was in a hurry. Every day counted. It was fine with him that Captain Swain was making a race around the Horn. The captain was in a hurry too. Still, it would be months before the Lady Wilma dropped anchor in San Francisco Bay. There would hardly be time enough to complete the voyage, reach the mines, make a fortune, and return to Boston before Aunt Arabella had to sell everything. But try they must. "This infernal firebox," Praisworthy said, wiping the sweat from his face. "We must think of a plan. We must expose the rogue who light-fingered our passage money." The truth of the matter was that neither Jack nor the butler had the slightest idea how to go about catching a thief. But Praisworthy was undaunted. They would surely think of something. Meanwhile they fed the flames, strengthened their backs, toughened their hands, and slept on deck under a balmy sky. In their free time they washed in buckets of seawater, and Jack began a letter home. He had no idea when or where he would mail it, but Praiseworthy had packed pen and paper and had no intention of allowing Jack to forget his duties. "But I would avoid any direct mention of our temporary misfortune," said the butler, with a wink. "No point in worrying your Aunt Arabella, even for a moment." Finding a shady spot under a lifeboat, Jack spread out his writing materials and began. All right, we'll find out about this letter that Jack's going to write later. Have a good rest of your day.